right, so we're ready?
Ready.
We're going to describe the operation of both the anti-ice valve as well as the ice protection on the engine that we don't think about it. Now, I'm going to caveat all this with, they didn't send me to art school, so don't judge my drawings, all I ask, okay, please.
Roger.
So, at the very start of the engine, we have an intake, right? Air comes through the intake. As air enters the engine compartment, we have a bird catcher here that's going to preferably stop anything from coming into the engine, birds, ice, that kind of stuff. Comes down here to the prop gearbox oil radiator, and then out the back side with a venturi. As air flows past here, it sucks stuff down the bottom of the engine. So the first level of ice protection that we have is on the intake. That's the first place where if I'm a molecule of ice that's entering the engine, I can get stopped, okay? Second is bird catcher. And a lot of times what you see is you see a buildup of ice down here around that prop gearbox radiator entrance, okay? So that's another place you can look for ice when you land. Now, once air comes through here, now it comes up here, you're gonna see the shaft for the engine itself with prop gearbox, with the propellers up here. At this point here, we have something called the main frame vanes, okay? This is a device, it's a circle. If you look at it from the front, it's a circle, and here is where the shaft comes through, and built into it are ramps all the way around this thing, and that it's not exact, they fill the whole thing in. So when air hits these ramps head on, it turns. And when it turns, it creates centrifugal force. Now, I got judged by my roommates in college who were aerospace engineers who laughed at me for using the word centrifugal force. They said there's no such thing as centrifugal force, there's such a thing as centrifugal acceleration. We don't have centrifugal force, to which I responded, when I said centrifugal force, did you understand what I was saying to you, dumbass? And they went, well, yeah, then it's a word, okay? For me, it's a word, okay? For the rest of humanity, other than you moron engineer types, it's a word, okay? So just get over yourself. Anyway, once it goes through here, it's accelerated. It's turned. The idea of providing that acceleration force and pushing it outward is to get any particulates that may still be in it, whether it's a feather, whether it's ice, whether it's dirt, whatever, to accelerate outward. Because on the other side of this mainframe vane, there's something called a splitter lip. Most diagrams that I see describing the splitter lip just show it as this flat thing at the bottom here. It's not a flat thing at the bottom here, it's actually a cylinder to put the air either on the outside of it or through the middle of it. Now that cylinder, when that air is accelerated and the particulates come out, particulates that go on the outside of the cylinder will go through something called the inlet particle separator, or IPSD. In an inlet particle separator device, get another marker here, we'll call this the IPSD, okay? So this first stage of ice protection to protect you, this is the second stage with the bird catcher, the third stage, and this mainframe vane is heated with hot oil from the engine. So it should hit that and stop ice from getting through, okay? So that really hot oil from the engine is gonna stop it, should stop it. But if it doesn't, anything that makes it past here goes through the inner particle separator, and at the very back of the engine, a venturi is created that sucks air through, and it gets where all the burning 1100 Fahrenheit heat of stuff is back there, it's gonna burn up any ice you have. Now that mainframe, this splitter lip is here. On the other side of the splitter lip, we're gonna continue to draw this shaft. You've got the axial stages of compression, which, by the way, are not protected from ice. And then you have the centrifugal stage of compression, stage 6 or P 3.0. This is 5 stages, and this is what we refer to as P 2.5, or the 5th stage of compression, okay? I'll erase those, because it's gonna get in the way of the drawing, okay? On the outside of here is what I refer to like as a tortoise shell. It's that part of the engine that clamps down and holds the outside of the engine. And attached to this stage are going to be 3 stages of variable inlet guide vanes and a couple more stages of stator, actually 3 more stages of stator vanes. The difference between a variable inlet guide vane and a stator vane are a variable inlet guide vane can turn. A stator vane is static, it's positioned in a specific point so that the air is routed to this, the stage 6 or P3, where it's compressed further, and right after that you get the fuel nozzles and you get ignition, you get an explosion which turns the turbines, which turn the engine. Now, we're gonna pretend we're at the very beginning of an engine start. If we're at the beginning of an engine start, the engine is not moving very fast. We have a device down here attached to the bottom of this engine called an anti-ice start bleed valve. Anti-ice start bleed valve. Now, much like a starter generator is technically a starter slash generator. The reason it's a starter slash generator is technically it's 2 things. It's the same device, but it has 2 functions. When you're starting, it's a starter, and when it accelerates fast enough, it becomes your DC generator. An anti-ice start bleed valve is the same thing. You have anti-ice function of it, and you have a start or starter bleed valve function of it, okay? There are times it's an anti-ice protector, and there are other times that it's a start bleed valve, okay? Times that it's a start bleed valve during an engine start. During an engine start, the H&U, which is a glorified carburetor, is mixing fuel and air to go in to provide combustion. At a low power setting, it does not need all of the air for the burn to get those things to move. So it has to send it somewhere. H&U, with some actuating rings, it has 3 actuating rings that'll move those variable inlet guide vanes, routes air to a valve in the anti-ice start bleed valve. So at low power settings, this valve is wide open, okay? Because the H&U doesn't need all of the air here for combustion to start in the engine. And as the engine accelerates and we're at higher power settings, it will close this valve, okay? That air is routed off both to help during the engine start and as well as to help with compressor stalls. We'll talk about that here in a second. This valve wide open that valve right there so that the air goes there, and then the anti-ice start bleed valve has the capability of doing something with that air. It has to put it somewhere, right? So there are 3 things that the anti-ice start bleed valve routes air to. One is that splitter lip. That thing's heated with hot air. Otherwise, when ice hit it, it would melt, right? Other thing that it's routed to are those 3 stages of variable inlet guide vanes. Those are heated in case any ice that happened to make it all the way back here past all of these things is going to get stopped there, so that we don't damage this stuff, right? We don't want ice going into the combustion portion. But it also routes it, in some cases, to that inlet particle separator. So all 3 things are heated with the anti-ice start bleed valve. So the problem is, as you get to higher power settings and that valve closes, no more air is going to those devices. But we have rules on when we turn on our intakes. If you are in visible moisture, and we can go through the definition of visible moisture, but it's clouds, sleet, ice, snow, fog, 1 mile or less visibility on the ground, puddles on the ground, rain, all over the place, it's raining, and it's less than 10 C, about 48 Fahrenheit, you're gonna turn on your intakes. When you turn on the intakes, it doesn't just heat the intake, okay? It doesn't just heat the intake. The other thing that it does is it forces this valve on the anti-ice start bleed valve open. We're at high power setting, H&U wants all of the air and all the fuel that it can get, right? It wants to burn as much as it can to get as much power of that engine. So when I turn on my intakes, what you're going to note is a rise in ITT and a drop in torque. 30, 40, 50 Celsius you're going to see on the engine, because the H&U expects a certain amount of air to reach that combustion chamber that it's routing to it, and you have taken it away. It's not going to adjust the amount of fuel that's going, but it will adjust because the amount of air that's going to it is adjusted, the temperature is going to rise, torque's going to drop, and therefore you see a degradation in engine performance. When it does that, the anti-ice start bleed valve with the intake switches, anti-ice start bleed valve opens, it routes now hot air to the splitter lip, variable inlet guide vanes, but not the inlet particle separator. It sends it through those two, but not the third. Okay? So let's pretend we are a particle of ice. We're entering this engine. Okay? Da, 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 da. First line of defense for that engine is going to be your intake, right? Period. The second line of defense is going to be that bird catcher, because there's a suction occurring here, pulling air out the bottom of the bird catcher. So odds are, if it didn't get caught here, it's going to get caught here. The third stage of protection is that little molecule gets here, is it's going to hit these hot, heated with oil, mainframe vanes, and it should melt off there. But if it doesn't, now it either gets forced around into the inlet particle separator, which is air that's going to go, air and ice that's going to go out the back of the engine where it's really hot, or it's going to hit this splitter lip, which is heated with hot air from the anti-ice start bleed valve, where it will melt off. And the last level of protection for your ice in this engine is if it hits these variable inlet guide vanes, it should melt off there, and you don't have ice entering your engine. Okay, so the anti-ice start bleed valve is there both for protecting you from ice, as well as being a start bleed valve during a start, but it's also there for compressor stalls, because according to GE, we're supposed to take off first flight of the day, cold soaked engine, meaning if either engine prior to start is plus 25 or colder, we consider that a cold soaked engine. To prevent compressor stalls, we take off with our low pressure bleed valves on. However, there's a caveat to that statement. Anytime the OAT is in excess of 20 Celsius, we never take off with our low pressure bleeds in auto. One of the things that will prevent you from doing is over-temp the engine on takeoff. You are more likely to over-temp the engine on takeoff with your low pressure bleed valves in auto than you are to compressor stall at plus 20 or warmer. The whole reason we take off with the low pressure bleed valves on is to prevent compressor stalls. The reason we take off with them on to prevent compressor stalls is only a cold weather phenomenon. Okay, hotter air, you're not going to have the compressor stall capability, because the engine, the metal in the engine, all the components are warmer, they are more malleable, and you're not going to have the compressor stall problem at a hot temperature as you are at a cold temperature. Any questions? Thanks, guys.